oops, I forgot, for the ones that are not here, I'm gonna hear this from now on. Juliana, thank you so much for sending me. You should have interrupted.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm a disaster. I'm so sorry. Well, I'm not sorry for you. I'm sorry for the next ones. I will tell them that they lost the best part, all the good jokes. So which they are not. But we need to do the message. Let me just tell you a little bit about what is happening in Chile. There's a professor at MIT that designed a ventilator that you can build with very simple ingredients. It's not a sophisticated ventilator in the sense that it will not be the one typically that you have in a hospital, but it works well enough. Now, building ventilator is not enough. I just want to clarify that in this virus, 80% of the people that enter the ICU with the need of a ventilator, they tend to die. So getting the ventilator is not enough. I mean, yes. So at least you're solving part of the problem for 20% of those individuals that need a ventilator. You need other things in addition. But in Chile, I do know that what they did was to get the specifications from the MIT professor, which are, by the way, are online, so everyone can take them. They took 2 machines that they're going to, it's on the newspapers, by the way, so there's no private information here. And one of them is being tested by the health department, so they're going to give the permit to be used, and the other one is to be able to build it. And these are all MIT alumni, exactly like you guys, all of you. And these are just MIT students that said, we need to solve this problem, that's it. Screw the airplane and screw the government. By the way, the next step after we know that this works and can be built, the idea is that they will send 2 prototypes to Brazil, 2 prototypes to Colombia, 2 prototypes to any place that has them, so they can do exactly the same thing. And this is the mold that you have to use, by the way, so just build it. We need to build the capacity. But Chile, that is one of the countries that has the best healthcare system among emerging markets, is under massive constraint. There's about only 250 ventilators in the whole country. So they are actually changing the ventilators that we use for animal use so that we can use them into people. So 250 only. I mean, I think that Boston in 3 hospitals will have that. So, but by the way, I don't know, but 250 sounds like a very small number. No, I would be scared. So they're investing on that. And it's important to understand what are the bottlenecks, and we invest in. So I think that it's these are the kind of actions that we need to do. It's very bold actions. And by the way, people should be investing in many different strategies, okay? So just like shoot anywhere. Again, here, emerging markets, they need to build 3 different type of things. And if one hits, that's what you need. You need one. So here we need a venture capitalist or a private equity mind. So do not bet on one only, because it might not work. So bet on 20, and if you get 15 that do not work, fine. 5 worked, so then those will repeat. So so in some sense, I hope that that they do that. But I think that that's the key for emerging markets. They are going to, unfortunately, if we don't act fast, they are going to be actually choosing and to open too soon, and that leads me to the dynamic trade-off. The dynamic trade-off is between the suffering today and the suffering tomorrow. I don't need a graph because this is very trivial. So if we open in the United States, for example, Melissa, who is a 2021 Sloan Fellow, okay? She was just telling me that they were thinking about maybe opening at the end of May in New York, that they're expecting to be opening in mid-June. So why they're taking such a long time? The reason why you don't want to open too soon is that you're making an extraordinary sacrifice to reduce the contagion. By the way, I'm going to produce a video that I will put on my web on the math of the contagion. There's a very simple math that explains how we can actually resolve the contagion of any pandemic, by the way, and it's a very simple math. I saw that from Professor Paul Romer, and I said, oh, let me do a video so any human being can understand it, okay? His video is good, but, you know, it's not, I mean, it's not that easy to understand. But in any case, I will try to make a video that explain the math about this to make it simpler. But what we don't want is that suddenly allow people to go out, which will increase the probability of contagion. And when we do that, the problem is that we will rebound, okay? So we did all this sacrifice just to get the healthcare system overwhelmed 6 months later, okay? And in fact, Merkel was, she gave a great talk. I mean, I am so German envy now. I mean, you have no idea. I'm going to start speaking like a German. I mean, like in my German envy, and by the way, I have German blood. So you have no idea about how envy I am. She spoke about the impact of releasing too soon, and it was just fantastic. I mean, it makes such a difference when the presidents have more than 2 neurons. It's just incredible, actually. It was fantastic. Fantastic speech explaining to the nation why, you know, they have to be patient, and we will open when it's safe. And by the way, they still have about 3,000 cases per day. So, you know, it's not released now. So they are thinking about how to do the release. They will do probably geographical release, which is the proper way, that you have like communities. So you allow in a neighborhood to interact in the neighborhood, but now you have it in the neighborhood, but you cannot just go from one place to the other. It's like having like hard boundaries, not at home, but in your neighborhood. I think that that's the best idea. And then by doing that, then you slow down, you allow people to be contagious, you buy time, you develop the capacity for testing, and then we can do a much bigger opening. That's why I think it's going to be very slow, because the capacity on the testing and the capacity on the healthcare system are taking quite some time. So, but so we don't want the rebound, okay? And that's what we call the dynamic trade-off, is that we do a sacrifice today to avoid the rebound in the future. Again, when you're constrained, it will be difficult for you to do that right away when you don't have financing. I have a question from Omar that says, you know, what about IMF loans for 5 years or 3 years with grace period? No, that's exactly what we need. By the way, I don't think that the IMF has the capacity to give the loans that we need. I will just call the Fed. And I said, Fed, can you just lend with me? The IMF will offer the managerial capacity to make sure that the macroeconomic accounts are used correctly. But then the Fed, yes, Omar, the Fed will lend to Brazil. Yes, I want the Fed to buy crappy debt. Yes, so that's I don't know if I answered your question, but yes, that's what I want. Yeah. I think that's, yeah, we need the financing so the governments can actually perform, and then we need to build the capacity in the healthcare sector. Okay, so that explains the situation for the crisis. If we don't act on this, then either the static trade-off or the dynamic trade-off are going to be we're going to release people, and therefore either we don't get the death now, but we will get them later, and therefore all the sacrifice will be in vain. So this is
but I think Julie has a question as well.
Oh, Julie, I didn't see that. Sorry, Julie.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Professor Rigaban. This follows on to Omar's question, which is that, so the IMF has proposed the idea of a $500 billion SDR issuance to help provide liquidity to various countries. And the US and India have pushed back on that. I was wondering what your thoughts are and what kind of impact the SDR issuance would have on emerging market countries in order to help in this kind of crisis.
So I actually think that they are concerned about moral hazard and adverse selection. And I think that at this time, we should just throw that away. So let me explain. The country that asks for the money might be trapped in an IMF program for too long. People are concerned about the consequences of getting the loan. I mean, not people, the countries are concerned if I get into that loan, what will be the consequence of that in the future for my ability to manage the economy during the recovery? Okay. And again, what if I were the IMF? It's much better to have the loan from the Fed in that sense. You know, you see, the Fed. Fed said, well, don't worry, I lent to AIG, so I know what it means to lend to a crappy loan. So don't worry, I can wait. So because in some sense, I think that that's actually the way it has to happen. So people are concerned about, you know, the fact that the IMF will come and affect. By the way, the issuance, the worry is that it might have an impact on the international interest rate. See? So but again, the numbers are so small. I don't understand why they're so concerned. I mean, the US is going to issue way more than $2 trillion because we issue the $2 trillion on the expenditures plus, let's assume that taxation goes down by $1 trillion. I mean, we're going to have a collapse on the GDP and profit. So we're going to issue $3, $4, $5 trillion on the government debt, and we're concerned by 10% of that. To me, the math doesn't. I cannot understand how that can have an impact on the interest rate. So I think that, in my view, they are thinking mostly about the moral hazard or the adverse selection aspect. No. So yeah, I think so. So. Useless discussion, in my view. Useless, completely useless discussion. Omar, you have another question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry to stop your lecture, but
no,
I thought
it's not a lecture, it's a conversation.
Okay, I thought it was interesting because a lot of the country cannot just come and print money without any consequences, or they are not based on the dollar. I mean, in the US, they have that luxury, but
yes.
In other countries, they don't. And in other countries, if they don't use the IMF, they will have to let people go and work with the health consequences that you explained. There is no choice.
I agree totally. Yes, that's why, beautiful question. So imagine we were a single nation in the world. We would like, right now, for the person that has the lowest borrowing cost to borrow on behalf of all of us. So imagine we have 145 participants. So imagine we're all 145, and I don't know if you know, but Julie is an expert in blockchain and cryptocurrencies, okay? She was a TA. So imagine that Julie is super trillionaire, okay? And which I expect she will be, and she will share a tiny base point with the faculty. But Julie, she will earn millions and billions and billions of dollars, okay? And so therefore, she has a very low cost of borrowing. So we will be all better off by writing the following contract. We say, Julie, you borrow on our behalf, you lend the money to us, and then we pay you. Is that okay? So when you think about that in the world, the person that should be borrowing like crazy should be Japan, US, and Europe. And they should be lending to the ones that have very high borrowing costs, which is us, the emerging markets. You see, to me, the efficient solution requires more international cooperation. I know, let me turn the lights, wait a second. See, when you live in the rural area, it gets darker here earlier. So what I was saying is that you would like to have, what is interesting is that the solution to the world right now requires more international cooperation than before. One is on information, on data, on research. I mean, we need every country to be working on a vaccine, and then please share it. I mean, we need to share. I mean, so we need way more coordination and cooperation today than before. And on the financing of the short-term debt and the crisis, the financing of the short-term crisis should be one of those aspects. But we need to write a contract that is credible for an emerging market, because you see, I don't think that Mexico is going to trust that that the IMF is going to behave properly. So therefore, you see, so there's an animosity between the IMF and López Obrador to start with. So I cannot imagine that can be solved unless you write this in a contract. So for example, one of the questions of Omar was, if we put a grace period, well, the grace period will not do it, because you see these governments are going to last a little bit longer, or they expect to last longer than the grace period. So if I have to pay, or I have to discipline myself because I have to subject myself to an IMF program 3 years from now, you know, it doesn't make it. I mean, in fact, it's worse, because I will actually be in the program, in the IMF program, exactly when I'm running for re-election. So they need to write a credible contract that is committed, and I don't know how to do that. I truly have no answer, but I know that the only possibilities is that we borrow from the person that has the lowest borrowing cost. That's kind of an easy way for me to see this. Okay, so yeah, I see that you're enjoying your chat anyway, so good. Any other questions on this? So I move to globalization. I mean, it's very, I mean, globalization is going to be related. So maybe if you have any questions about globalization, supply chain, just give me a second, and then I explain that. There's something very cool that I learned today. Okay, so I don't see any questions. So let me talk then about globalization. Okay, so you can. It's easier if you raise your hand, because I see you. It's harder for me to read the chat. About Mexico, most cautious have come from individuals self-motivated to take care instead of waiting for the government. How can we help Mexicans have better information? Ooh, there is a lot of people making stupid decisions. Yeah, that's wow. How can we help them to get better information? What a good question. I'm gonna write it down. No, I have no idea. So this is not only Mexico. This will be any country would like to have better information. The question is, we can make it, collect the information privately, so we can release it to everybody without any restrictions. You see? I hope that you understand that maybe some governments might not want to say how bad their own situation is. Okay, so we have to find a public way to produce that data to be able. But yes, so there are some web pages that will say that, and there are some web pages that talk about the capacity of the healthcare system. But we need to make them in such a way. We need to get to the media. That's if we find the data, my commitment. If we find the data, I give you the commitment that I'll find the person in Mexico that will talk to the media, so we can put this on the media and on all the newspapers. And it's simple. It's simple. The second part is very simple. I have many friends in all of these countries, so I can actually help on the second one. I don't know how to produce better information in Mexico. Maybe there is a way, but I have not paid attention. But no, it's written, so I'll think about it. And again, I want to produce that without the government, so we can actually release it. Like what is happening in the US. You see, in the US, we have a proliferation of information that is all privately produced. It's fantastic. It's super consistent with each other, which is great, which means that if they're making a bias, if they have a bias, they will have a bias everywhere. It's the same bias. So, but at least we're acting with the same information. So there are possibilities. By the way, we have many super influential alumni in Mexico. So we will be able to, if we have the data, we will be able to get that data to the right sources. Okay, let me talk about someone that is not dyslexic. If you think that there's something in the chat, I'm dyslexic. So for me, reading the chat is just impossible. So if anyone is non-dyslexic and can read the chat faster than me, and you feel that there's an important question, just interrupt me and I'll deal with the question. Is that okay? The reason why I'm asking you not to write on the chat is because I cannot read. I mean, I read, but it just takes me 200 hours. Okay, so let me talk about globalization. So the first thing about the globalization is the supply chain. So I want to talk a little bit about the diversification and the difference between diversification and robustness. And I think that we are just learning this. Engineers make decisions about the supply chain very differently from the way economists do it. we maximize expected value. So we look at any situation, and in the economic terms, we just look at expected value, and then we decide how to allocate the supply chain according to that. Well, you see, an engineer will never think that way. I mean, I'm not going to design a bridge so the expected life is that the bridge will be there on average. That doesn't happen. So engineers, the way they think about a bridge is they said, well, I want that to be alive in a relatively bad situation that will guarantee that 99.99% of the time, the bridge will be there. And that is called robust control or robust optimization. So what they do is they think about the problem to try to maximize the outcome in the worst possible outcome. But worst possible is not, I mean, worst possible is not every single conceivable circumstance. So we have designed the supply chains. By the way, we have been super effective in designing the supply chain. And by the way, massive improvements in welfare. So I'm all great. But we have designed them maximizing expected value. And therefore we have things like, just-in-time production. Inventories are zero or virtually zero. Everything arrives, is just produced and released. And therefore what that means is that we are, when the economy is working properly, therefore on average, okay, we have a great supply chain. Well, we suddenly have the coronavirus, and one of the implications of the coronavirus is that we stop international trade, okay? We stop traveling and we stop all the contacts. And now, well, just in time means that you're just screwed, okay? The supplies don't arrive, you have no inventory, and then the whole supply chain has a disruption one after the other. Furthermore, it's very difficult for countries to redevelop their capabilities. I think that I knew how to build a mask. I forgot because, I have not built a mask in the last 200 years. So I'm pretty sure that in the US, they know how to build masks, but we have not developed the capacity to build them fast enough. So truly, a robust approach, by the way, this is the implications of this to the supply chain is going to be the following. First, we're going to move a lot of the capabilities in-home. Is that okay? That is super inefficient because truly, what we should do is to develop capabilities in different countries. So we should have capability to produce in China, but also in Brazil, also in Mexico, also in South Africa, also in Turkey, and also in, Bangladesh. So I want to have this dispersed around the world. I need to have ability to produce, which means capability. I need to have knowledge in each of these places, which means that in some sense, my cost might go up because instead of going through the massive efficiency of full specialization, so there's one single company that produces all the parts for everybody, I need to distribute that along many, many, many countries. And that is a different form of diversification. That's a diversification that protects you against natural disasters, but very disruptive natural disasters, not rain. So major disruptive natural disasters. And in fact, there are many examples of those that companies are going to do. They need to develop those capabilities elsewhere. So that's one form of the diversification that needs to take place. Now, I think that the path is going to be first that we're going to bring part of those jobs and capabilities in-house, so to their homes, and then somebody will actually think about it and say, yeah, well, China is cheaper than Brazil, and Brazil is cheaper than US, so let me produce in Brazil. By the way, a lot of the emerging markets need to change their mentality. Countries like Thailand, Taiwan, China, Singapore, Korea, in general are very welcoming. Malaysia in general are very welcoming to foreign direct investment. So when a multinational comes to those countries, they tend to be welcomed, and the implication of that means that you welcome means that that I'm not going to be expropriated, that I will not be abused by the government. So they're welcoming. See, in Latin America, there are very few countries that welcome multinationals. And that is a problem. Because even though we might have the capacity to produce, we are not not interested in bringing them to our region. And that needs to change dramatically. Otherwise, we're going to lose this train, by the way. So at the beginning, what's going to happen is that we're going to take that supply chain and bring part of those jobs to their own home countries. So it's going to be US and Germany and Europe, and we will actually produce a little bit domestically. But then they will realize that there's an alternative, which is develop the capabilities in emerging markets. The emerging markets that are smart enough to accept those multinationals are going to be the big, big, big winners here. This has very little to do with engineers. The engineers in India are great. The engineers in Argentina are great. The engineers in Chile are great. The engineers in emerging markets are great. It's not about engineers. It's about, you know, all the aspects, the management aspects that come from those companies, and that involves it's not exclusive. I mean, you need a port, you need logistics, but you see, a multinational can build their own logistics. That's fine. The key issue here will be, is the government going to have the conditions in which it's worth for me going to that country? I always give the example that Maersk, which is the biggest container transporter in the world, has their own terminal in Rotterdam. What is the likelihood that they will have their own terminal in Venezuela, my country? I can tell you the likelihood is zero. Zero chance that they can build their own terminal in my country. You get me? That belongs to the government. That doesn't belong to the private sector. So that mentality implies that Maersk will never build anything in my crappy country. And by the way, there are other reasons why you should not build it in Venezuela, but maybe there's not the capacity, but it is a problem. So that you need to actually have the private sector. By the way, this happens in the oil industry, which is the paradoxical thing in Venezuela. In the oil industry, we allow the private sector to have tremendous capacity for export, hence what we can continue producing, even though the government is incompetent. But manufacturing, I think, is going to be really, really hard for emerging markets to do this without some opening of the mind of the government. The government doesn't need to be subsidizing. They need to don't get on the way of that. Luke, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I'm going to read out Lindelwa's question. What do you think about George Soros' idea published today that the West must give emerging market countries 2-year debt payment holiday? Let's not focus on the moral hazard, but the implications of the financials in this case.
So if you give, I mean, there need to be some subsidy for that transfer to take place. If I give them 2 years holidays, somebody has to finance the 2 years interest payments at least. By the way, I agree. So if you delay the interest payment in emerging markets, that's something like 10 to 12, 15% of the budget. So you free 11, 12, 13% of the budget. See, what I'm worried is that if I allow the, Venezuelan government to have 11% more of their budget, the likelihood that they invest that in healthcare capacity is zero, or very close to zero. So I blank checks to people that behave badly, I'm concerned, but I will do it anyway. Is that okay? Because you will help at least some of them. So I will help the Chiles of the world, the Peru, the Colombias of the world, the Malaysias of the world, the Indonesia. So I will be able to help many of those, but you have to understand why the reluctance exists. And the reluctance,
I understand.
if they're going to use it badly, then I need some. That's why if you attach this to the IMF, you say, well, at least the IMF is, there's some, check and balances that this is being invested in healthcare.
But to be fair,
no.
U.S. can print money because they're U.S. dollars denominated, and Fed can decide to print. So, to be fair, these companies cannot. And if the West, which is driven by U.S., can print money at will, which is also a topic of moral hazard, but like Kristen Forbes said today, when you're sitting in that room of MPC, moral hazard, when things are going nuts, it's not the topic that you really want to discuss. You want to go out there and help people. If the West has power to help people with their own printing money, shouldn't it be a moral responsibility of the West to help the countries that cannot just print money?
Yes, I agree. In fact, this is exactly what I said. So the way I will do it is to have very little conditioning from the IMF. This is the assurance that probably the Fed will require, and I will just go with the Fed and buy the Brazilian debt. This is exactly what I said before, and so yes, I agree. Yeah, and I agree with Kristen. I mean, we tend to agree on everything. So yes. So I will actually do it through purchasing the debt. So issue debt, issue special bonds that are all COVID bonds, and I just purchase whatever they issue. Yeah, I will definitely do that. And again, I don't know if you were here, but that is close to my statement that the person that should borrow is the one that has the lowest interest rate, the lower cost of borrowing right now. So they should do that. Camila?
Hi, this is Larissa. So yesterday night there was news about like the potentially this drug that might work, and the stock market rebounded. So my question is just how long, so supposing that we do find an antiviral drug that works, how long do you think that it would take for economies to rebound, and how long do you how do you foresee this like reopening of things?
So I think it still will be slow, Larissa, because even so, imagine we find a vaccine, okay, and we start vaccinating people. First, we have to produce 7 billion vaccines, and everybody needs to be vaccinated. So, first problem, who you think might get the vaccines first? Or let me ask that differently. When do you think the vaccine will get to India? So, might be at the end of the year. I mean, I cannot imagine that we're going to produce 7 billion vaccines and then, I mean, there's one way to do this is that the United Nations purchases a patent for $200 billion, okay? And then they give the patent to every pharmaceutical lab on earth, and we produce the vaccines everywhere. Every country has a domestic pharmaceutical companies, and we just do this and then give it for free, no? So like, we have to do something like that. And still there, producing 7 billions will take a while. By the way, what do we do with the people in the United States that they don't believe in vaccines? What do we do? That's a tough one, you see. I believe in vaccines, so, but I don't want to impose my moral values on others. So, but this is something that I'm constantly thinking about. What are we going to do in the United States the day we find a vaccine? And now you go to the theater. I would like to ask the person sitting next to me if they actually have been vaccinated. Because I mean, the vaccines might last a little bit, but so.
But it doesn't, I mean, at the end of the day, it would only matter if you have been vaccinated and that person has not. The only person they would harm is themselves, right? So.
Yeah, but I remember
natural
that
selection is not so tough.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yes. So I can cough to the left. My wife is always sitting on my right. So, but again, if the vaccines are not 100% effective, I mean, how many? I mean, some of you probably have been vaccinated against small pox, chicken pox, and so I was vaccinated. I mean, everything that you can imagine. I have all the scars. Varicella in Spanish. I don't know. This thing is called smallpox in English. But many people. But that actually that has a period in which they die down. So not clear. So there's some public vaccinations. This is public goods. So sometimes, and they're produce externalities. Sometimes we need governments to be very strong and says, you know what, everybody gets a vaccine. I don't care. Or everybody needs a test. I don't care. Those are the things that we need to do. So, but vaccines have probabilities of death. So how you do that is difficult.
So this drug is not a vaccine. It's it's a treatment drug. It's an antiviral.
Yeah. So yes, I know. So I mean, just put the example of the vaccine, which will allow us to go out for sure. Yeah. Still will take a time to be able to produce and to be able to deliver. And by the way, because the supply chain is all integrated, it's hard for us to recover the supply chain without India. For example, a lot of the back office of banks is in India. So if you're applying for a loan now, a mortgage, for example, they will tell you don't upload it on the web. That will be the statement. Why? Because when you upload it to the web, it goes to India. And then in India, they do the analysis. But there's no one in India. So if you're a loan officer, will ask you, no, just send me the stuff to me. So you're sending in an email your tax forms and everything. You just send it to people on email because it is hard to go back to India. So the supply chain will be restricted to the last one. So I think that's why I think the recovery will be slow, even if we find a vaccine. That's why I move right away to the vaccine. Daniel, Mexico.
Thank you, Roberto. How are you?
Good.
I have a couple of quick questions. How do you balance this economic collapse with the health issue, assuming that just between, from the people who is infected, between 6 and 6.5% of them die, and especially I think we're starting to see that there's kind of groups that are more vulnerable to these kind of infections. And for example, in Mexico, people are trying to say that they prefer to die being in the streets, but having some money to come to eat, than dying from coronavirus.
Yeah.
And my second question is, how much do you think, for example, in a country like Mexico, which has like 46, 48% debt GDP, how much do you think they will have to increase the deficit to be able to navigate this crisis?
So on the first one, I already talked a little bit about that, but let me just repeat. So I think this is when I spoke about the static versus the dynamic trade-off. I think that's you're describing that in Mexico, and many people in Mexico are saying, well, I prefer to die of the virus than die of starvation. So let me pick my way of dying. No, and I understand that statement. And again, if the healthcare has zero capacity, which is the point that I said, the lower the healthcare capacity, the bigger and more vivid that trade-off will become. So I don't know how to solve it, and the way to solve, in my view, I don't know how to solve it in practice. The way I will devote my time to solve that is that I do the shutdown to build the healthcare and the medical capacity. So that's where I will be investing all my money if I were Mexico. So whatever debt that they're going to issue, I will invest all of that in building the healthcare capacity, because that will allow me to have a shorter lockdown. You see my point? So with the healthcare capacity that I have right now, then I have to choose how people are going to die. And I think that's actually non-palatable in any country. Ajit?
You wouldn't put any money to SMEs. You will put all the money to the health system.
Maybe you need some money to deal with the short-run misery of the lockdown. So I will put some of there, but I will put a significant proportion of the money on the healthcare system. Developed clinics that you can, like a pizza box, you construct them and you do it. And again, it's just, I will provide some money. It's like to the citizens, so they can have relatively good standards of living. By the way I will do that is through the firms. I will ask the firms, don't fire a single person, and just pay 50% of the salaries. Just lower their salaries, but so they can leave. And you tell the firms, I will give you the loans, but then I will invest all my resources in the healthcare capacity. Yes, absolutely.
Do you have like an idea how much points of the GDP we should bring to deficit?
So we are expecting, so not for Mexico, because I don't know the healthcare side, but just to give you an idea, we are expecting that this crisis is going to add between 30 to 40% debt to GDP ratio for all the developed nations that already started in much better conditions than emerging markets. So I will expect that most of the emerging markets' debt will need to more than double. if they want to replicate what the developed nations are doing. You see my point? That's why, by the way, the chance that Mexico can double their debt, I think, is very low. So they will better find a different solution. Invest the money on healthcare capacity so you can get out of this much faster. Yeah. There's someone that says iPhone de Pablo. Oh, sorry, Ajit is first. Sorry. Ajit
Thanks,
first.
Professor, for the interaction. Mine was actually a comment more than a question. So the technology and skill transfers, which has been aided by globalization, has had the positive network effect of increasing employment and raising standards of living in developing economies. Now, with the shifting of all these manufacturing and supply chains back home by the developed economies, the chasm between developed and developing is going to widen. So I just want to hear your thoughts on it and what do you think could be mitigants?
So very good question. I don't know if it's going to widen or shrink. Emerging markets are going to hurt. That's for sure. So let me put it this way. Globalization made, it was good for the workers in emerging markets because we bring capital and management that is missing, and therefore now we can produce more. So this is good for the workers in emerging markets for sure. I agree with that. But this is also good for developed nations because they are buying the parts cheaper, you see? So the developed nations also get a benefit. So this is kind of the gains from trade, okay? So we both benefit each other. I hate the word win-win, but in this case, sounds like one, okay? It's not win-win because the workers in the developed nations lose their jobs. So it's not win-win, is that okay? There are distributional issues in developed nations. So the workers that with low skills will benefit in the developing nations, but the low-skilled workers will hurt in the developed nations. And a lot of the discussion of income inequality that we have in developed nations, one of the faults is globalization. So when you take this out of the emerging markets, then the growth potential of emerging markets is going to go down, which is your point. Absolutely. Yeah, this will be bad. This will be bad. Not only that, Ajit, there's going to be immigration backlash. We are already seeing that. So immigration will be shut down, and that in some sense will hurt your ability to get the proper training, okay? So, and furthermore, this might have permanent effect. You might lose a generation of people because what happens to immigration law is that when they get tougher, it takes a long time to get weaker. You see my point? I mean, this doesn't change with the cycle. If by any chance they say from now on, no more Chinese, so there's a quota on Chinese in American universities, I mean, that's going to have a long-term impact in China. I mean, for sure. But by the way, the backlash against China is very likely. I think I said that before. Let me just repeat it here if you were not here the last week. Because the populists are going to use this. By the way, we see that already with Trump, but the populists are going to use this as a way to blame somebody. And so therefore they will blame India. They will say, this all came because we have this operation. So I do expect a backlash against China, sorry, not India, against China. And I expect a backlash against globalization in general. So unfortunately, I think that the world will be a little bit closer. I think that the wise thing that emerging markets should do is to open among themselves. So form regional agreements, a little bit of what South Asia has. Those are the things that might allow you to continue having gains from trade, but we will need more of that. Otherwise, I mean, there's no chance that Bangladesh has capacity to produce everything for themselves. No chance. And therefore, they need to rely on foreigners and foreign trade. So that is needed.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay. Pablo, iPhone de Pablo.
Hi, Professor. Thank you for the talk. Very quick question. I was thinking, as the government and the corporate sector take on more debt and they come from a very high level, historically high, and if you think that the economy is going to grow very slowly in the next few years, I guess governments are going to try to still implement very expansionary policies like fiscal and monetary. So how do you see going back to normal without a lot of suffering? Because it's going to be very hard in the next 1-2 years for developing countries to start implementing measures to kind of cut back on expenditures, raise taxes to pay back debt. So how do you see the recovery? How do you see the economy going back and debt going back to normal levels?
I mean, for developed nations, I don't see a problem, because what they are going to do is keep the pedal to the metal. So they will just push the economy up to infinity, and so therefore they will run the deficits. The economy will shoot up. Inflation rate will become 3-4%, maybe more, and only then they start thinking about taxes and collecting the money. Okay, so they will be very irresponsible for a while. Developing economies is going to be harder to do that, especially on the fiscal side. So their hope, I mean, if you think about hope, is that by printing, they will produce a devaluation that will give them competitive advantage, and therefore I will become then the future production site of Pfizer. So when Pfizer is thinking about what is my next partner worldwide, I don't want to produce entirely on one single country. I want to diversify that supply chain, then they will look at one country. But you understand that the only benefit that they get from the devaluation or the inflation rate is when the supply chain starts to recover, that somebody is willing to invest. So you're right, this is going to take a long time, because the fiscal side has zero capacity. So if you print too much, well, unless we organize a default, that's another one. That's another one. A possibility. So I'm just, shooting from my hip now, but a possibility is that that we issue debt in emerging markets. Okay, and then 2 years from now, when it's time to increase taxes, we call Britney Spears as our public speakers, and she just said, "Oops, I just did it again," and we default. That's it. So we say, like, we have our consultant here, Britney Spears, and she can tell you that with some music, see if that makes you feel better, but we restructure. This is assuming that is not debt from the IMF or the Fed in a coordinated way to allow that path. Is that okay, Pablo? So if we have the developed world helping, then I assume that they're not going to request the payment. That's the whole point of help. So that we will give some grace period so you can actually increase your taxes a little bit more smoothly. So, Nelson. Nelson?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Thanks so much for this conversation, Professor. Do you think this crisis will nurture a global or local discussion about universal basic income? I mean, do you see a way that emerging countries could benefit from that? Discuss a more equitable balance of global wealth?
So I don't like in the word universal basic income. I don't like the words income and universal. But for the sake of the argument, I'm going to answer. Okay. So let me say, I would like to have universal standards of living. Okay. So okay. It's about the basket that you consume, not about the income that you get. But let's assume that we're going to implement that through income. So let me talk about income. But this is a discussion for the next 10 years, not for now. But right now, we are implicitly implementing universal basic income. I mean, implicitly we're doing that by extending unemployment insurance. So I think that this shows that, in times of crisis, we need to have mechanisms that provide minimum standards of living to the citizens. And the way we're doing that is by providing the income. So it would be good if we were to use this income so the difference between this and the universal basic income is that this is a crisis, so it's supposed to be temporary. So the people that are kind of supporting the Republicans, let me be more precise, the Republicans or the right wings or the conservatives that are supporting the provision of help to the workers, they are doing that under the assumption that this is transitory. So it will be taken out down the road. The discussion of universal basic income is that well, it should be an individual will receive a universal basic income, but they need to make sure that they retrain themselves or they do something to improve themselves so they can reintegrate to the labor market. That's kind of the point. So getting a universal income at 65 might be very reasonable, okay? And again, we want to provide standards of living for the elderly, so I would have no problem with that. But providing universal basic income to a person of 30, the way they are implementing that right now is almost conditional on the recovery. However, these people might be unemployed for 2 or 3 years. So in the practice, it's a universal basic income. I always think about standards of living. You see, what a person needs in New York is very different what that person needs in, I don't know, in some rural area in Texas. I mean, College Station, which is Texas A&M is. I mean, the persons need very different levels of income. So I don't want to give them the same income. I would like to give them the same standards of living, minimum standards of living. So I agree. We will benefit, the world will benefit with a much better distribution of income and capabilities. Would be good that we developed nations teach emerging markets a lot of things so they can do a lot of things in the case of crisis appears. That for 2 reasons. One, is good for them, but second, it's also good for us because it will allow us to redistribute all that production in the case of an accident. And by the way, environmental accidents are going to look exactly like this one. So we better start thinking, okay? But yes, so I will agree with that. And the only reason why this is happening today is because in principle is supposed to be transitory. In Europe, I think this is going to be more long-lasting than in the United States. In the United States, the transitoriness of all of these transfers is very big, meaning that the political system reacts very badly to these transfers. So there will be change. Very, very likely there will be change. So they will be here for a while and then they will be undone very fast. In Europe, they are more patient, so it might look like an universal basic income for a little bit longer. Good question. Fiona.
Hi, so maybe my question is about how or when would the economic situation maybe transform into social unrest? Have we seen something, or how can countries prepare themselves for that? Because I think last year we saw some violence starting to evolve, especially in my situation, I saw it in Latin America. So how can countries prepare for that to avoid having larger social unrest?
You are correct. So I think that most emerging markets, they are concerned about the social unrest that starvation could cause. So that I don't think you can prepare. By the way, social unrest is something that is very badly measured in the sense that you don't see it until it explodes. Sorry, not explodes, explodes. So it takes a while, you don't see it, and then it's just a massive revolution and people are burning. This happened in, what was the state? It was Wisconsin. Was that in Wisconsin? That the people swapped? Sorry?
Could we see something like that here in the US also? You mentioned
it did happen in the US in one of the states. When did that? It was Wisconsin, one of the Midwest states. People were upset. They said that this is too Michigan. Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey. In Michigan, people said, you have to be kidding me. This is too strict. So they went all together. Okay, so forget about social distancing on that second. I mean, the biggest protest you can do is that we're all together. What are you going to do now? I mean, you have to put the military, and it's hard to put the military on the streets. Emerging markets, they will put the military on the streets. Yeah, they love, I mean, so we love dictators in our countries. So if you give me the chance to put the military and then govern by decree, we don't waste a single second. But in the US, the social unrest will force the hands of the local authorities. And by the way, here, most of what is happening most of what is happening in the US is that a lot of the policies are decided by the governors. Okay, so it's very local. And even though, you know, it's good that somebody's making decisions. This is bad from the coordination point of view. And by the way, you notice that the governors are starting to speak to each other, because there's no way to get out of here without some form of coordination. This would be significantly better if the central government had a clear message to all. Significantly better. Because then everybody just follow instructions. So when people show up at the State House in Boston saying that it has been too long, the guy says, yeah, I agree with you. But if I allow you to get out, I will lose my job or something like that. I mean, like this is a state of war, so I cannot actually go against the orders of the chief in command. Period. Beautiful. It's just beautiful. So we have not invoked that, for example, on the production side. It's called the DPA, which is that the government requests the private sector to produce in the case of emergency. So we have not done that, which is to me surprising in the US. So I am wondering why we're not doing that. So why are we not producing, again, healthcare capacity? So why we are not producing tiny hospitals in containers? I mean, the containers are empty anyway, so let's use them better. Like how many beds you can put in a container? 2? Open the containers. I just truly don't understand. And this is the lack of having some guidance from the center that takes this with the urgency that is required and then builds all the time that we're spending here, 1 month, spend it in finding vaccine and cures. I understand that yes, good, we're doing that. That for sure we're doing that. But then work on resilience. By the way, this is the same for the environment. We make this mistake all the time. We work a lot on trying to avoid the accident of global warming. We need to also work on making sure that when the world is warm, that we survive. Don't bet on one strategy only. That's not how engineers do it. We invest in 20 different strategies to see which one works. So we should be, for example, we invest very little on the resilience of the environment. By the way, in our sustainability classes, we don't even talk about the word resilience. Half of the time, we don't speak about it. So we need to actually put resilience on the healthcare sector, and therefore we need to work on the healthcare sector capacity, and also work on the healthcare sector, the technological solution, which is the innovation. So we need to invest in both. And I see very little on the second, at least I don't see the urgency. By the way, Massachusetts is reacting differently. So if you're here in Massachusetts, you can see the convention center. I mean, the governors are doing that. This should be happening at the level of the central government. The central government should be saying, please start building, we need to use all the convention centers, all the stadiums. We're going to put the sick here. But the sick not only need bed, they need nurses. So let's get everyone. This is a course on nursing. This needs coordination. By the way, then you need to give a permit for people to become a nurse, okay? There will be a nurse supervising 10 incompetent nurses, okay? But if they do that, I will be a nurse. I will be willing to risk my life to try to save somebody else. But I need to have the license to be able to not operate, but to provide the service of whatever service I have been trained to. I cannot stick a needle because I will faint, but that's a minor point. But this is very difficult for a governor to do that. We need to have a much bigger coordination, and I think we're failing that in the US. Juliana, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I've seen a lot of partnerships between public and private sector in Brazil, maybe because we're just screwed. And the companies are seeing that if they don't do anything, the market is broken. Do you think in the emerging markets, this kind of relationship or partnership will be much stronger than in the developed countries?
Yes. And the reason is because it happens in a very informal way.
Yeah.
Just typically what happened. So what happened to MIT is that the Ministry of Health in MIT is a friend of some alumni, and the alumni wants to build the ventilators, okay? So he calls his personal friend, and then she says, oh, but that's not my jurisdiction. Let me talk to the person in science, whatever, someone in science. And then that ministry gets a call from the other minister that says, let's build this and make sure that you, I will actually, if it works, I do the test fast and I'll accept it, but you need to do the science, whatever. And there was a permit that needed to be importing a product that doesn't exist, registered. Okay, so again, the way it happened is that you have a cousin and the cousin has a cousin and then a friend, a childhood friend. This is Latin America. So, you know, emerging market is all about family. So we don't hug now, but they will be hugging lately. So that's why it happens. It happens in a very relational way, you see? So that's the beauty. It allows more a better chance to occur.
Thank you.
But on the other hand, it is also bad because in some countries it's not happening at all. Because the person who wants to build it doesn't have the friend. That's the bad part. So there are countries that, for example, Colombia, that are very open to these partnerships. So therefore, I expect Colombia to be able to increase the capacity much faster. I mean, Chile, those are two countries where this is very usual. But, you know, there are others in which this is more unusual. And by the way, also you have other countries where the government has been speaking and trashing the private sector for the last 3 years. Like how, for example, this conversation will happen in Daniel's country, in Mexico, where you have López Obrador that has been bashing the private sector for the last, you know, since forever. Like, how do I know what is the credible contract that López Obrador can write for the private sector to believe truly the intentions of the president? And again, one way to do it is that you just invoke an emergency law, and then you just declare, you said, no, you have no option, you have to build it. And I think that we might end up doing that. Oh, Daniel, you have a question.
Yes, Roberto, thank you very much. Sorry for asking again. Maybe this is kind of a financial and economic question, but I was wondering, what is your view in terms of how the stock market is behaving in the last couple of weeks? That it's growing a lot. It's having a lot of and the expectations of the GDP, it's terrible. So what do you think about that?
Just for the record, I have lost a boatload of money on this damn market. Is that okay? So I think I should be the last one to ever make a comment on this irrational, you know, yes, look, and I'm close to retired. Yes, a boatload of money. In fact, my wife is not speaking to me until I recover all that money. You know how this is called for the companies when they go down and then they have to go watermark. You know, it's called watermark.
Yes, the watermark. Yes.
Well, I think I have a watermark for the next 5 years. So actually, I'm doing consulting like crazy now because my wife will not forgive me. No, the stock market, it looks to me that it's just very wild. I am out of the. It's hard for me to understand how this how to do this in the stock market. It's just hard for me to understand. By the way, the macro, what I know, the macro news that are coming are going to be devastating.
10%, at least 10%. The first quarter, they expect -8 or 10%, right?
Yeah, no. But no. The total drop is going to be like 35.
Exactly,
I mean,
but
yeah, but and the reason why the first quarter is not going to be that bad, is because they measure through the month, through the quarter. So, and they tend to measure at the end of February. So they will not get the true decline. No. This is going to be 35% decline of GDP for sure, if not bigger than that. I said on my first talk that unemployment was going to be north of 20. I stick to that for sure. So on the macro news, this is going to be horrible. So when the stock market goes up, I just don't understand it. So
don't you think that maybe the stock market is assuming that something is coming soon in terms of a vaccine or a medicine or
Yeah, Larissa, that was Larissa's question. That indeed, when they announced the possibility of a treatment, a cure, the stock market went up. But we see those are good news. I expect that movement. But truly, the market is just reacting very wildly to news about interest rate and unemployment that are really difficult to understand. Julie, you had a question? Oh no, you're muted, Julie.
My hand down, but I would agree with you, Professor Rigobon, that I think it's a lot of like Fed-driven optimism, and then also there's like a lot of trading flow happening right now through these bots who kind of scroll the news for trends, and a lot of the kind of optimism about vaccines and stuff that might be driving it. But I personally see it going back down, but I think that economic news is going to be pretty scary.
Yeah, no, don't tell me. I mean, it's like, yes, I need some good news in my relational life now with my wife, and they're all entirely related to the stock market. Look.
She's a patient woman, so she'll stay on.
Yes.
It's not like it's her first time.
No, it's not. No.
If I had a dime every time you mention your wife in our class.
Well, she's a very important part of my life, so yes.
Yes, indeed.
And my dog, you see, I also mentioned my dog.
Indeed, only the LA of yours forever. What do you think about incentivizing those with liquidity to invest in real estate properties, given that multiplier effect is relatively high because you inject directly to those who will spend it? Now, so that money will flow and the real economy, which we are forgetting, it's what it matters, the real economy, stupid, right? Not the S&P.
Yes.
The engine of real economy will get a booster. If yes, now what should we do about the income disparity that widens after crisis and recession like these?
So the income first on income inequality. So the income inequality is going to shrink because of the stock market collapse, but then it's going to boom, okay? The stock market will rebound at some point in time. So in some sense, it will actually go up, the income inequality. But the worst here is that we will have things like, for example, education inequality that we have not had for a long time. The gap between good schooling systems and bad schooling systems has increased. How long it took private schools to move to online classes? Like what, 2 days maximum? They all purchased the Zoom license, and they are all actually online now. But the public school system, I don't know, in some poor town and rural area, first the kids have no iPads, the kids have very little access to internet. So the education gap has increased, and that will have a long-lasting effect, by the way. And then you have the healthcare gap, which is also very, very big, in the sense that you have a lot of discrimination. For example, there's an disproportionate amount of African Americans and Latins that are dying for the disease. So you have a lot of inequality that is going to take place. I think that the problem now is that you don't want to do anything right now on the demand. Look, you see, you don't want to open construction yet or real estate because so by the way, in most of the countries, what they will open is construction first. By the way, that's actually very clever. So before opening the Goldman Sachs of the world, they want to open construction first. But I need to get to the point where I start opening activities by sector and regions, and then I am all for subsidizing, do whatever you want, okay, or create incentives to buy real estate and increase real estate. By the way, rebuild all the roads. We need a new train. This is the time to build the train. Just build the train and just. In fact, how much will it cost? It cannot cost $2 trillion a train. Okay? And if it costs $2 trillion, spend the $2 trillion. Who cares? Everybody agrees that the US can print infinite right now. So I will agree that that's. But you see, they cannot do it now. They can't. They need to wait until we are safe, and then we push the demand. We want the demand to be repressed right now. So that is a timing, the complicated timing. And that also implies, can you imagine when the states start opening at different times? It's going to be a disaster. You will have people that will like to move from one state to the other. So we're going to to put a barrier across states? Remember last time we were talking about, there were many on here that were talking about the fact that they know someone that has a New York plate and so on, and indeed just we're going to end up in a very bad place. So that's, again, coordination is at a premium now. You want to say something, Luke? You look like you want to say something.
I don't know if I follow, because I understand the point of view about construction. But for example, let's look at small airline industry. Recently, the government announced $25 billion in stimulus and directly injecting to the airline industry. Let's not revisit moral hazard, but only 30% they need to pay back. They're literally handing the money to failing airline industry, saying, hey, use this money, taxpayer dollars, and pay your employees. Yeah, so exactly. if the employees of the airline industry can get paid, why can't people who got laid off get a construction job and make the roads better?
Because look, it's fantastic. And the reason why they can give money to one and not the other is because the government of the United States is very well designed to give money to very large corporations. We are horrible at giving money to any company that has 50 people. In fact, we have no idea how to do it. So is in that failure, this is the job preservation policies that I spoke a little bit last week and I beginning today. But we are very bad at giving the money to small firms. So the small firms just dismantle. No, so I thought that you were talking about, giving incentives to people to build in construction. So that is in the recovery. I agree with that. Right now on the crisis, we should find a way to get the money to the small firms, medium and small firms, but in some sense that we don't have the mechanisms to do that. You see, for example, the Fed lends to companies that have the ability to have corporate debt in financial markets. Your and my company, we cannot issue debt in the financial market. You see, look, so we're excluded from that lending facility. That was the first one. So
isn't it no-brainer? You can renovate elementary schools that are just failing.
I know. So I have a lot of places to renovate.
And it's shut down now, so it's perfect time, right?
No, because people that work in construction, they have to work next to each other.
But you can do social distance. Korea had one of the highest voter turnout, 62%. You can do social distance. You don't have to shut down the whole damn country.
I know. Look, I know, I understand. So I think that we need to get to a place where we are getting, the only way to do that is to tell people, if you're a construction worker between the ages of 25 and 35, you can work. Everybody else cannot go there. So we have to be very precise about what is the group of construction workers that we will allow to renew the schooling system. I think that because they're afraid to do any of that, and again, I think a lot of fear is driving the states and the liability. You see, I think a lot of the universities are afraid to open the campuses in the summer because of the liability. So we need to think about this. In fact, if my daughter goes to Brown and she gets sick and God forbid she passes away, I will be very pissed off with Brown. So the issue here is all the liabilities that will imply if the governor opens, allows construction companies to work, and then we shoot up the cases on coronavirus and people die because of that, they will be destroyed. So because of that fear, they're waiting. But I agree with you. I want to have construction on everything, reconstruct the whole country and reconstruct it. But we need to get to the point where we can do that in a safe way. And by the way, I will do that by occupation. So I will take some occupations that are very meaningful to the people that are suffering the most, and they will open that first, for sure. Transportation. Construction, transportation, not of buses. We don't need that, but I need the trucks. I need the trucks to start moving again, and the trains moving again. So we need some pollution. Warner, last question. It's just almost 7:30.
Thank you, Professor. I would just want to ask, so how can we prevent some companies of taking advantage of this loan that they're given from the US Fed? And for instance, when you have the Ruth Chris Steakhouse that they got the $20 million loan, and we know that they're using up so they don't waste their capital that they have in hand to pay their employees. How can we prevent that? What could be done about it?
No, so no. You remember someone in the talk today said that, you know, Christine said today that, for example, this is not the time to be thinking about moral hazard. So I don't think we can prevent it. And it's I said that last week, and you know, Christine said it today, and let me repeat it again. I think that this is not the time to be cute. Okay, so political cuteness will not pay now. We need, if we are going to do something, we need to overshoot on the help, not undershoot. You see, Wagner, we need to make sure that people receive way more help than what they actually need, to make sure that we can keep them at home, that the companies pay their salaries. Because if I pay too little, if I make the mistake, the risk is very asymmetric. If I pay too little, then the company will go bankrupt anyway, and they will fire the workers anyway. So you're right, a lot of the money will be wasted, a lot. So the Democrats have to get that out of their brain. If you really want to help the poor, you need to help everybody. So cuteness here doesn't pay. So, and again, this is true in every country, Here we have to help anyone. So my joke is that, you know, everybody should get a loan if you have hair. And you know, my Latino students were saying, like, you know, professor, you don't have any. I say, I know, I don't need a loan. I am in the camp that I don't need a loan, but everybody should actually get a loan. If you show up and you have hair or any facial hair, then you get a loan, because and then they will be misused. It's fine with me. It's fine with me. Here is about solidarity. So it has to be solidarity in everywhere. By the way, all of you are doing solidarity. All of you are staying home, protecting the elderly. I understand this virus might affect you as well, of course. I mean, this is a dangerous virus, but if the whole world had the death probability that you have, we will be actually social distancing ourselves, but every single thing will be working. And therefore, in some sense, you are doing a sacrifice for the others. And therefore, I actually think that it's just fair that everybody makes sacrifices. So sacrifices means that I will do something for somebody without expecting a reward, or even doing something that the person didn't need. So it's moral hazard out of the discussion. Help anyone that shows up. Let me stop and thank you so much again for showing up. Next week, I will talk about the things that I believe are going to change in the future after coronavirus. And if you want me to continue doing these things, I am more than delighted. I have no problem actually doing more if you find the topics and we can have more conversations. But next week, I want to talk about international organizations, how they're going to change. I think a little bit about Europe and the European Monetary Union, and the European Union in particular, how they're going to change, and what is the role that we have to have. And I think that the word of next week is going to be coordination, 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 more integration than ever. And it's not about coordination of economic aspects, it's more coordination on sharing of information, coordination on policies, coordination on a fiscal stance, and we need to do a lot. So next week is going to be about the things that we need to change, a lot about resilience. I don't like the word resilience. I'm an engineer. I call that robustness. We need to create healthcare robustness. We need to create environmental robustness, and so on. So I will talk more, not only about COVID, I will talk about all the systemic risk that is waiting for us down the road. Thank you so much, guys, for showing up.
Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot.